I hadn't seen my parents in 8 years. Not a phone call, not a text, nothing. Then they walked into the back of my church on my wedding day. I was standing at the altar in a tuxedo that fit perfectly, holding Hope's hand, and suddenly my entire body went cold. My mother was in the third pew from the back wearing pearls and a dress that probably cost more than my truck. My father was beside her in a suit that didn't quite fit, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The usher hadn't seated them. They'd just shown up, uninvited, unwelcome, and I had no idea what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't good. My name is Ryan Harper, and this is the story of how I finally told everyone the truth about my family. The truth they'd been hiding for years. The whole room was about to find out why I'd spent the last 8 years on a farm, why I hadn't spoken to my parents since I was 15, and why my sister Madison spent all those years of telling lies about me. They had no idea what I was about to tell everyone there. But to understand how we got here, you need to know what it was like growing up in the Harper house. My parents, Deb and Gary, were the type of people who cared more about how things looked than how they actually were. Gary had a corporate job that kept him away most weeks. Deb spent her days at the country club planning galas and talking about her perfect children to anyone who would listen. Except I was never part of that perfect narrative. Madison was. Madison was 3 years younger than me, but somehow she became the center of everything by the time she was 8 years old. Straight A's captain of the soccer team, early acceptance to an elite boarding school by age 12, everything she did was celebrated like she'd just won an Olympic medal. Our parents would brag about her at dinner parties. Gary would mention her future like it was already written. She's going to Harvard, mark my words. Deb would spend hours helping her with college prep materials, buying her tutors, driving her to tournaments 3 hours away while I stayed home with a babysitter. I had decent grades too. I loved sketching, spent hours drawing designs and plans. But when I showed my father one of my sketches once, he said, "That's nice, but it's not going to make you successful." Art was impractical. Ambition in his mind meant business school or medicine. Anything else was a waste. By the time I was 13, I'd learned to make myself smaller. I stopped showing my parents my artwork. I stopped asking them to come to my school events. When I brought home a college prep list I'd created, my dad glanced at it and said, "Not ambitious enough." Madison, meanwhile, had her future mapped out before she even finished high school, and they were mapping it alongside her every step of the way. I wasn't angry about it then. I was just invisible. And invisibility, I would learn, was safer than being seen. The gap between us grew wider every year. Madison got the tutors, the opportunities, the attention. I got the criticism, not the kind that came out and said, "You're not good enough." That would have been too honest. It came in smaller ways. "You're so quiet," my mother would say, like quietness was a character flaw. "You always make everything about yourself," my father would say, when I tried to talk about something that mattered to me, or the silent treatment, the way they'd smile at Madison's accomplishments and just nod at mine. By 15, I wasn't just invisible. I was the problem they couldn't quite solve. And then came the thing that changed everything. I made a stupid mistake when I was 15. Not the kind of mistake that ruins your life, but the kind that gives your parents an excuse to do what they've been thinking about doing all along. I got caught shoplifting with a friend. Something minor, a dare that went too far. We were at a mall, and we took something we didn't need and couldn't afford to replace. It was stupid. It was the first time I'd ever been in trouble, and I was terrified. The police station was cold and fluorescent. I was in a holding cell for 2 hours, scared out of my mind. I was 15 years old, and I thought my life was over. The officer told me it was a first-time offense, that it could be expunged from my record if I stayed out of trouble. He said it was fixable. But I wasn't thinking about the law. I was thinking about my parents' faces when they found out. Grandpa was the one who came to pick me up. Not my mother. Not my father. My grandfather. He didn't yell at me on the drive home. He just asked me what happened. Listened to the whole story and said, "You made a mistake. People do. Now we figure it out from here." That's what unconditional family sounds like, I would later realize. But I didn't know it yet. 3 days later, my parents called a family meeting in the living room. I was sitting on the couch expecting grounding restrictions, maybe a talking to about responsibility and consequences. What I got instead was the day that changed my entire life. My mother was holding a coffee cup. I remember that detail so clearly. My father was avoiding my eyes. Madison was at the top of the stairs, not quite in the room, but close enough to listen. "We've made a decision," my father said. "We think you need a fresh start. You're going to stay with Grandpa and Grandma on the farm for a while, just for a year or so, to get some space, to reset." A fresh start. That's what they called it. But the word reset meant something different to me. I was shocked. I asked them what I'd done that was so bad. It was my first offense. I was going to have a lawyer. The officer had said it could be handled. My mother said, "It's not just about this, Ryan. It's about a pattern. We think some space will be good for everyone." What they didn't say, but I heard anyway, was that I was the problem. And the solution was to send me away. My father drove me to the farm 3 days later, 6 hours in a car where neither of us spoke much. When we got there, he shook Grandpa's hand, said a few words I couldn't quite hear, and drove back the same day. No hug. No, "I love you." Just gone. Grandma had a room ready for me upstairs. She'd made up the bed with fresh sheets and put a small desk by the window. She'd known. They'd known this was coming, and they'd been prepared to take me in while my own parents showed me the door. I didn't know it then, but I wouldn't go home again for 8 years. The farm wasn't what I expected. I'd only visited a handful of times growing up, and those visits were always quick, a day or two at most. Something to do when we had nowhere else to be. But living there was different. Living there meant understanding what it meant to have a place where you actually belonged. Grandpa didn't treat me like a problem that needed fixing. On my first morning, Grandma made pancakes and bacon. She didn't ask why I was there or what I'd done wrong. She just said, "Eat," and I did. Grandpa came in from the barn and said, "We need help around here. You know anything about animals?" I said no. He said, "Well, you will soon." And that was it. No lectures, no therapy speak, no disappointment in his eyes. Just steady, practical acceptance. Within a week, I had chores. I was feeding the horses at dawn, helping with the cattle, learning how to fix fences and maintain equipment. My hands got calluses. My shoulders got stronger, and something inside me started to heal, even though I didn't realize I was broken. Uncle Scott came by about a month after I arrived. He was Grandpa's son, a mechanic by trade, the kind of guy who worked with his hands, and didn't need much more than that to be happy. He brought tools and stayed for a weekend, helping with repairs around the property. But he also asked me questions. Real questions. What do you like to do? What do you want out of life? When I mentioned I liked sketching, he didn't dismiss it like my father had. He said, "That's a real skill. You could go places with that." And he meant it. Scott stayed steady. That became the phrase I'd use years later to describe what he did. While my parents disappeared, while my sister forgot about me, while the life I'd known just ended. Scott showed up. Every month, sometimes twice a month. He'd bring supplies for the farm, spend time with Grandpa, and always make time to check in with me. He was witness to everything that happened over the next 3 years, and he was paying attention. The first year on the farm was the hardest. I was withdrawn, angry beneath a surface of numbness. I'd wake up sad and go to bed the same way. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for my parents to call and say this was all a mistake, that they wanted me to come home. That call never came. I got a birthday card from my mother once, perfunctory vague, signed by both of them. "Hope you're well." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just, "Hope you're well," like they were checking a box. By the second year, something shifted. I was laughing more, eating more. I was starting to see the farm not as exile, but as something else entirely. A place where I could just be, where I didn't have to perform or prove myself or make myself smaller. Grandpa would tell me stories while we worked about his own struggles, his own failures, the way life had challenged him. He never said it directly, but the message was clear. You're not broken. You were just in the wrong place with the wrong people. In the third year, I started sketching again. Not for validation, but because I wanted to. I'd sit on the porch after chores and draw plans for expanding the barn ideas, for reorganizing the property designs that actually came from inside me. Grandpa would look at my sketches and say, "That's good work, Ryan. That's real skill." And I believed him. For the first time in my life, I believed someone when they said I was worth something. By 18, I wasn't the same person who'd arrived at the farm 3 years earlier. I was solid, present. I knew who I was when nobody was judging me, and I made a decision that surprised everyone. I didn't want to go home. Grandpa brought it up gently one evening. We were sitting on the porch, and he said, "You're legally grown now. If you want to try again with your folks, I won't stop you." I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. Then I said no. I'd spent 3 years grieving people who were still alive. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life doing it. "Good," Grandpa said. "I was hoping you'd say that." I moved into town for college at 18. Agricultural science with a focus on sustainable design. I wasn't running towards something, I was running away from the life my parents had chosen for me, but running in a direction that felt right. The farm was still there, still my anchor. But I was building something new. At 21, I decided to try again with my parents. I know it sounds naive now, but I was hopeful. I was older, I had some distance. Maybe they'd changed. Maybe enough time had passed that we could actually talk about what happened. So I called. My mother answered. She sounded warm. "Ryan, it's so good to hear from you." My father got on an extension. He said, "We'd love to reconnect. Let's have dinner." It felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The dinner was at a nice restaurant downtown. My parents got there early, I could tell. They were already seated when I arrived. We ordered food. We made small talk about college and the weather. And then I tried to talk about the elephant in the room, the 8 years, the silence, what it had been like to be sent away. "We did what was best for you," my mother said. "Can't you see that you were struggling? And we helped." "I was 15, I said. "I made one mistake. And you?" "We were trying to help," my father interrupted. "This was supposed to be a fresh start for you." I tried again. "You never called. You never explained. You just sent me away and then—" "You're overreacting, Ryan," my mother said. Her tone had shifted. It was colder now, dismissive. "That was so long ago. Why do you have to keep bringing it up?" The subtext was clear. Stop making this difficult. Stop making yourself the victim. Just be grateful and move on. I finished dinner. I didn't say much after that, and I left. Knowing that my parents weren't interested in acknowledging what they'd done, They wanted me to forget it, to pretend it never happened, to be grateful for the gift of exile. I didn't go back after that. Not in person, anyway. But when I was 23, something happened that changed everything. I was on the phone with my father, a strained conversation, the kind where you're waiting for the other person to say something that will either bridge the gap or widen it. He got defensive about something I'd said, and in a moment of frustration, he just said it. He said the thing that had been true the whole time. Look, we thought sending you away would reset things, give you space, give Madison space to grow without you, complicating things. It was supposed to be temporary, but then it just became permanent. We didn't know how to fix it. I was recording, not to be vindictive, but because I'd learned that when you're dealing with people who gaslight you, you need proof. And there it was, his own words. The truth finally from the person who'd pretended so hard it wasn't real. Madison, meanwhile, had done something different with her silence. While my parents were pretending the farm years never happened, my sister was actively rewriting them. She was telling people I'd been sent away because I was troubled. A drug addict, some versions said. Unstable. A burden on the family. I found out about this in the most modern way possible, a text from a cousin. Madison told me you got into serious trouble in high school. Is that true? She made it sound like you were a drug addict or something. The text came in at 1:57 p.m. on a Thursday. I stared at it for a long time. Madison had never bothered to ask me why I was sent away. She'd just invented a story that made sense to her, one that justified what my parents had done and erased her own complicity. I kept that text. I kept the recording of my father. I kept the birthday card with the vague signature. I kept the absence, the years of missed calls, and ignored attempts at contact. I kept all of it because I was starting to understand something. I was going to need proof someday, because people like my parents and my sister don't face the truth unless they have no other choice. I was 24 when I met Hope. She wasn't from my world. Her family was stable in a way I'd never experienced, not perfect, but genuinely present. They asked real questions. They listened to answers. When Hope asked me about my family, I told her the whole story. I expected her to flinch, to offer the kind of empty sympathy people usually give when they don't know what else to say. Instead, she listened, and then she asked something that stopped me cold. Have you thought about just telling them no, or telling everyone else the truth? I hadn't. I'd spent 8 years carrying this thing alone, protecting my parents by staying silent, protecting Madison by not correcting the lies she told. I'd been the one managing everyone else's comfort, while my own had been sacrificed years ago. Hope didn't say it in an accusatory way. She just asked it like it was an obvious question, like I'd never considered that I had a choice. She wanted to meet Grandpa and Grandma. That was important to her, understanding the people who'd actually shown up for me. When she met them, she hugged them like they were already family. She asked them questions about me, about the farm, about what those early years had been like. Grandma told her, Ryan always had a good heart. He just needed people who could see it. Hope became part of my steady circle. She was the first person who made me believe I didn't have to carry this alone. At 25, I proposed. It felt right in a way nothing else in my life had felt right before. Hope said yes immediately, like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to what she already knew, that we were supposed to be building something together. Then my parents called. We'd love to help with the wedding, my mother said. Family matters. The subtext was heavy. We want to control this narrative. We want to be part of your happiness, so we can shape how people see us in relation to it. I hesitated. I wasn't ready yet. But I didn't shut the door completely. Hope gently pushed back. Only if you're comfortable, but know that I'll support you either way. That's what unconditional looked like. Not, You should forgive them, or they're your family. Just, whatever you decide, I'm with you. Over the next few months, I wrestled with it. Should I include them? Would that be the bigger person? Would that finally give me the closure? Everyone kept saying I needed. I started talking to Grandpa about it. He listened, and then he said something simple. You don't owe them access to your happiness. I called a family video call when I was sure about my decision. Deb, Gary, and Madison, all on the screen. I was calm when I said it. I'd practiced, but not in a way that made me sound rehearsed. Just clear. I need to say something, and I need you to listen. You sent me away at 15. I understand now why you did it. Dad? You admitted on a recording that you sent me away so Madison could have space to grow without me complicating things. Madison, you've spent years telling lies about why I was sent away, telling people I was troubled that I was a drug addict, when you know that's not true. I've kept the text where a cousin told me what you said. I've kept the recording. I've kept it all. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not including you in my wedding. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for peace. The silence on the video call was deafening. My mother's voice when she finally spoke was tight. You're overreacting, Ryan. My father said. We were trying to help you. Madison said nothing. Then she just closed the browser. Disconnected. Couldn't handle being confronted with her own lies. Those are my boundaries, I said. They're not negotiable. I hung up after that. 2 weeks later, I sent them an email. Just the three of them. It was short and formal, the kind of email you send when you're not asking for dialogue, you're making a statement. You are not invited to my wedding. This is a boundary I'm setting to protect my peace. I am not open to discussion on this. I wish you well in your lives. No signature, no warmth, just truth. The wedding was going to be in 4 weeks. In those 4 weeks, I received pressure from extended family. Aunt Martha called. Your mom is devastated, Ryan. Can't you just let them sit in the back? A cousin texted. Is your mom really not coming? That seems harsh. The implicit message in every call and text was the same. Your pain is less important than their comfort. Your boundary is less important than their feeling included. But hope kept me steady. When doubt crept in, and it did, she'd take my hand and say, remember what your dad said on that recording. Remember why you sent the email. That hasn't changed. You deserve peace. Grandma pulled me aside 3 days before the wedding. We were at the farm sitting on the porch, and she said, I'm worried this is going to cause a lot of pain, not just for them, but for you. She wasn't saying I was wrong. She was saying she knew what was coming, family fracture, possibly permanent. But then she said, we'll stand by you, whatever happens. Grandpa nodded beside her. We're with you. Uncle Scott came to the farm that evening. He'd been watching this whole thing unfold, and he wanted me to know something. You're making the right call, he said. I've seen what those people do. I've seen how they operate, and I've seen who you became despite it. Don't let them take this day from you. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous about marrying Hope, that part felt right, inevitable even. But I was clear about something else. I was clear that if my parents showed up anyway, I would speak. I would not apologize for my truth. I would not let them gaslight me or Dishbuta or the people in that room. I wrote something in a journal that night. I didn't show it to anyone, but I needed to put the words somewhere, tomorrow. No matter what happens, I walk out of that church as a man who chose himself. Not because I'm angry, because I finally believe I'm worth choosing. I was ready. I didn't know if they would show up, but I was ready for whatever came. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at dawn. The ceremony was at 2 in the afternoon. Hope and I had decided on a first look she wanted to see me before we walked down the aisle. Just the two of us to ground ourselves in what we were actually doing. It was supposed to be just a few minutes of quiet before everything else began. Grandpa came to find me about 40 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start. We were in a back room at the venue, the kind of space they give to grooms who need a moment of privacy. "Ryan," he said, and his tone told me something was wrong. "Your parents are here." My stomach dropped. I'd known it was possible. I'd been prepared for it intellectually. But standing there in my tuxedo minutes before I was supposed to marry the woman I loved, something in me froze. "They're in the back," Grandpa continued. "They want to talk to you." I closed my eyes for a second, took a breath. Then I said, "Okay, tell them I'll come find them in a minute." I needed hope. I went to where she was waiting in a separate room, already in her dress hair and makeup, looking like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I told her what was happening. She didn't hesitate. "We'll handle it," she said. "Whatever you need to do, I'm with you." I found them in the back hallway of the venue. My mother was in a formal dress, the kind she bought for important events. My father was in a suit that didn't quite fit. They both looked nervous. Madison wasn't with them. Of course she wasn't. My mother spoke first. "Honey, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have let so much time pass. We were wrong. Can we start over? Can we just put this behind us?" Her apology had no specificity. It was the same deflection I'd heard before. Not, "I'm sorry for abandoning you," or "I'm sorry for lying about why I sent you away." Just, "I'm sorry for letting time pass," like we'd both just been passive observers to 8 years of silence. My father stood behind her, nodding like a man who'd rehearsed this moment and was grateful to finally get it over with. "No," I said. It came out calm and clear. "You don't get to do this. Not today. Not ever." My mother tried again. "You're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have," I said. "You're not invited. You chose to come anyway. That's on you. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit in the back and be silent, or you're going to leave. Those are your options. There is no third option where you've suddenly changed, and we're going to hug it out." Hope appeared beside me then. She took my hand, and just that simple gesture, her hand in mine, reminded me of why I was doing this. She was real. This was real. Everything else was just noise. Grandpa positioned himself near my parents like a quiet guardrail, not threatening but present. Witness to the boundary I was setting. My father opened his mouth like he might say something else. Then he closed it again. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, I said. "You need to decide now." I didn't wait for their response. I walked back to Hope, and we went to the sanctuary together. My parents sat in the back of the church during the entire ceremony. I was aware of them, the way you're aware of a weight in your chest, present, persistent, but not the main thing. The main thing was Hope walking towards me, was the way her eyes locked onto mine, was the vow I was about to make to build something real with someone who actually chose me. When we got to the part where we wrote our own vows, I'd intentionally put in a line about family. Not in the way most people do. Not a grateful nod to the parents who raised them. I said, "I choose to build a family with you, not based on blood or obligation, but based on showing up, based on choosing each other every single day, based on a simple truth, you're safe here." Hope's eyes teared up. She knew what that meant. She'd heard enough about my childhood to understand that I was making a promise. I was breaking the cycle. Our kids, if we had them, would grow up in a home where they were safe, where they belonged, where they didn't have to make themselves smaller to be loved. We were pronounced married. We walked back down the aisle together, and I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. That part was over. The reception was at a rooftop venue downtown, the kind of place with string lights and a view of the city. Our families mingled Hope's parents, who welcomed Grandpa and Grandma like they'd always been part of their lives. Uncle Scott was there too, talking with Hope's brothers. The room felt right in a way I'd never experienced at a family gathering before. It felt like home, even though it was made up of people who had no biological obligation to be there. They just chose to be. During dinner before the toasts, Hope's father stood up and said some words about his daughter and how happy he was for us. Then Hope's mother went talking about how Hope had always known what she wanted, and that what she wanted was me. There were laughs and tears. It felt normal. It felt good. Then Grandpa stood up. He kept it brief. "I've known Ryan his whole life," he said. "I watched him become a man on my farm, and I've never seen him happier than he is right now. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of the choice he made to protect his own peace, and I'm proud to stand with him today." He sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Some people understood exactly what he meant. Others were confused. But everyone understood that it was meaningful. The dessert course came and went. Hope and I cut the cake. We danced. The whole evening had a lightness to it that I hadn't expected. My parents were still there. They were sitting at a table near the back, not participating, but not leaving either. I made a deliberate choice not to engage with them. But then it was time for the reception remarks. The MC asked if anyone else wanted to say a few words. Usually this is when a sibling makes a joke about the groom or an old friend tells an embarrassing story. It's supposed to be fun and light. I stood up instead. The room quieted. I took the microphone and I looked out at everyone. I saw Hope watching me, her hand over her heart. I saw Grandpa and Grandma in the front row. I saw Uncle Scott with a knowing nod. I saw my parents in the back, suddenly very still. "I need to say something," I said. "And I need to be honest about it, because everyone in this room deserves to know the truth." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The entire room was already listening. My parents are here tonight. They weren't invited, but they came anyway. And before I say what I'm about to say, I want to be clear. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone. I'm doing this because silence is what got us here in the first place. I paused, took a breath. When I was 15 years old, my family decided that I was a complication in my sister's life. So they sent me away. They told me it was for a fresh start. But what it really was abandonment. They sent me to live with my grandparents on a farm, and then they didn't call. They didn't explain. They didn't try to make it right. For 8 years. I could see my mother's face going pale. During that time, my sister told people I was a drug addict, that I was troubled that I'd been sent away because I was a problem. And my parents let that narrative stand because it made them look better, made them look like they'd made the hard but loving choice. The truth is, they made the selfish choice. They sacrificed one child to make space for another. I pulled out my phone. I have proof of this. I have a recording of my father admitting exactly why they sent me away. He said, "We thought sending you away would reset things, give you space, give Madison space to grow without you complicating things." Those are his words, not my interpretation, his actual words. I pressed play. Gary's voice filled the room uncomfortable and defensive, saying exactly what he'd said to me years ago. The audio was clear. The meaning was undeniable. I also have text messages from my sister fabricating stories about me to our family. I have birthday cards with vague signatures from people who couldn't even be bothered to actually acknowledge what they'd done. I looked directly at my parents then. "You didn't raise me. Grandpa and Grandma did. Grandpa and Grandma showed me what unconditional family looks like, and they did it by simply showing up, by accepting me, by never once making me feel like I was the problem. My mother was crying now. My father was looking at the table. I'm not angry anymore, I continued. I'm not broken by what you did. I'm actually grateful in a weird way, because being sent away forced me to find real family, to understand what love actually looks like. And I'm building a life with Hope and her family's people who show up, who stay, who don't disappear when things get hard. I raised my glass. So here's what I want to say to everyone in this room. You saw tonight the cost of what my parents did. You saw the people who actually mattered show up and stand beside me. And you now know the truth about why I spent 8 years away from people who claim to be my family. That truth matters, and I'm not carrying it alone anymore. I looked at Hope. I'm grateful to be standing here surrounded by people who chose me, who didn't have to, but did. That's what family actually is. I sat down. The silence in the room was complete. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was the kind of silence that happens when everyone is processing something heavy. Then Grandpa stood up and started clapping, just like that. Slow, deliberate claps. And then Grandma joined him. Then Uncle Scott. Then Hope's entire family. Then the wedding guests who understood what had just happened started clapping too. Not everyone did. Some people looked uncomfortable. A few extended family members who had loyalties split between me and my parents didn't clap. But the majority of the room understood I'd just told the truth, backed by evidence, and I'd done it in a way that was honest, but not cruel. My parents left after that. My father got up first, quietly. My mother followed a few minutes later. Madison never showed her face at the reception. She'd stayed home, knowing what was coming, knowing she couldn't defend herself. In the days after the wedding, the family fragmented in exactly the way I'd known it would. Some extended family reached out to me with support. That took courage. One cousin texted, "I believe you." Another aunt went silent, which told me she'd chosen Team Deb and Gary. Others had conflicted conversations where they acknowledged what I'd said, while also expressing concern about my harshness. But I didn't carry the weight of their judgment anymore. That was the freedom in finally speaking the truth. My mother sent me an email a week later. It was vague and performative, the way everything from her had always been. "I'm sorry you feel hurt by your childhood. I was doing the best I could." No specific acknowledgement. No real apology. Just another deflection dressed up as maternal concern. I didn't respond. My father never reached out again. I learned through Grandpa that he'd told some relatives, "Ryan's made his choice." I have to respect that. Which was actually the most honest thing he'd ever done. He accepted that he'd lost access to his son, and he wasn't going to fight it. Madison's silence was the loudest thing of all. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't reach out. She just disappeared from my life in a way that was almost cleaner than if she'd tried to apologize. I later heard through a mutual acquaintance that she was struggling with some personal things, that her career had stalled, that she seemed smaller somehow. But I didn't feel vindication about that. I just felt nothing. She'd stopped being real to me a long time ago. 5 years later, Hope and I bought a house. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We decorated it the way we wanted, filled it with people we chose. Grandpa and Grandma came over every Sunday. Uncle Scott was there for holidays. Hope's family was woven into the fabric of our daily lives. 2 years after that, we had a daughter. We named her Grace, and the first thing we did when we brought her home from the hospital was tell her, "You're safe here." We meant it in every possible way. I'd broken the cycle. My daughter wouldn't grow up wondering if she was enough. She wouldn't learn to make herself smaller. She wouldn't be sacrificed for anyone else's image or trajectory. She would be safe, and she would be loved, and she would know the difference between those two things. One evening when Grace was about 4, she asked me, "Daddy, why doesn't Grandma come to our house?" I sat down beside her and told her the whole story. Not the complicated version, she was too young for that, but the true version, age-appropriate. There are people who love you, sweetheart, and there are people who don't show up the way real love should. Sometimes those are the same people, and that's sad. But what matters is that everyone here, Grandpa, Grandma, Mommy, Uncle Scott, we all show up. We all choose each other. That's what real family is. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "That's better than anything else anyway." She was right. The justice I'd sought wasn't in revenge or in watching my parents suffer. It was in building something so good, so real, that I didn't need them anymore. It was in standing in front of everyone I cared about and telling the truth. It was in the moment when my daughter asked why someone wasn't there, and I could honestly answer that some people just don't get to be part of good things if they didn't earn it. Years had passed. I didn't think about my childhood often anymore. But when I did, I thought about what Uncle Scott used to say, "You're safe here." And I thought about how he was right. I was safe on that farm. I was safe with people who chose me, and now I was creating safety for the next generation. That was my emotional justice. Not their pain, but my peace. Not their punishment, but my freedom. I was finally home.